Hey folks, Chris from Maple Street Guitars in Atlanta, Georgia here, and today we're taking a look at one of the most beloved tube amps of all time, the Fender Princeton Reverb. And in this instance, we actually have an original 68. This is one of what we call the Drip Edge models. It has the aluminum that goes around the outside of the grill. It's something that we see on the modern reissue, which we also have here. So we figured we'd take a look and see how the reissue fares against the original. It's not all that often that we have an original here, so figured this might be a fun little experiment. So we're going to take a look at some of the specs, some similarities, some differences, talk a little bit about the Drip Edge model in general, and try them out with a couple different guitars. So the 68 Drip Edge Princeton is a rather interesting amp in that this came from that period where Fender was transitioning. You have the CBS purchase and such, so you had the black panel amps going over to the now silver panel amps. But with this one being that earliest silver face, it still has that black panel kind of tone stack and circuit. So with the newer reissue, although it has the same look, I think it is going for something a little bit different. After all, they do have a 65 reissue if you want a more black panel style Princeton. This one is also part of what they refer to as their, I believe, vintage modified series. So we do have a slightly modified circuit here, so it'll be really interesting to see how these two compare. And for today's demo, we're going to do two guitars. I figured try the amps out in a few different kind of contexts, and in order to do that best, you got to have a couple different guitars. So we're going to use a Fender American Pro 2 Stratocaster, just to get our kind of modern Strat thing in. And we're going to use a Gibson Les Paul Traditional from 2014. This is a 120th anniversary model, kind of a bit more in touch with your classic Les Paul standards sort of thing. So this particular 68 Princeton is actually all original. We took this very recently to Jeff Bakos here in Atlanta. He's one of our go-to guys for anything tube amp. He does fantastic work. Definitely check him out if you're in the area. And he confirmed that this was an all-original amplifier, even most of the tubes, though he did change out, I believe, one of the preamp tubes and the reverb tube on this, though we do still have those original tubes with this amp. So we're going to really hear what kind of an original 68 Princeton sound like. This one in particular has just the original Fender speaker. Now, if you compare that to the newer one, firstly, both of them are still 15-watt amps, but with this model, this obviously has all of the new tubes that it would come with. We haven't swapped any tubes out on this model, and this has a Celestion speaker. In this instance, it is the, want to make sure I get this right, a 10-inch 1030 speaker. So we have 10-inch speakers in both amps, so that's going to be consistent, but we're definitely going to hear the differences between not only the two different amplifier circuits, but also the two different speakers. To start out, I wanted to take a listen to both of these amps set identical. Now, obviously, different amplifiers with different pots and parts and such, you're going to have a little bit of difference in terms of, two amps sounding ever so slightly different even when the knobs are at the same place, but I figured that was probably the best place to start. So we have both of these two amps set at 2.5 volume-wise, and the EQ's just set to 5. Bass and treble on 5 on both amplifiers. Reverb and tremolo are off. So I'm not sure about you, but I definitely heard quite a big difference between these two amplifiers. I think the modern one definitely has a lot more kind of low end. The bass is really, really present, whereas the older one has a lot more clarity and different mid-range kind of content with the two of them. So very interesting. So let's kind of take things a step further and take a look at each amp, and we'll adjust the EQ to see kind of what our overall range is. So we'll start with the bass control on each. We'll start with the Princeton to my left, which is the Reissue, and then go to the right. We'll see kind of how the bass response changes as we adjust the bass control, and then we'll do the same thing with the treble control. So curious to hear what kind of range we're working with both of these amplifiers. So now I wanted to take a look at how the reverb and tremolo sound, comparing the two. So I tried to take both of our EQs and adjust them to sound as close as I could get them without taking a really, really long time to try to dial in a lot of nuance. So I went for kind of just blanket thing in general, turning down the low end on this one and cranking up the low end a bit on the original, and adding a little bit more top end, a little bit more treble to the Reissue. So we'll sort of see how that sounds, and let's take a listen to how the reverb and tremolo sounds on both amps. And lastly, we gotta have some fun and turn things up a little bit. So I'm gonna crank up both amplifiers in this very small room. I'm sure my coworkers are gonna love me. We'll just keep it kind of at a more of a natural kind of breakup level. So I'm gonna turn both amps up to 5.5. That should be enough to get both amps kind of doing their thing, juiced up a little bit without really, hopefully not completely destroying my eardrums. We'll see how that goes. And we got to use the Les Paul to get a little bit more dirt out of these. So let's listen to both of these amps in a kind of hopefully full breakup context. So my ears definitely hurt after that, and I needed to take a little break before I could continue, but that does it for our look at these two awesome 68 Princeton Reverbs. The Princeton Reverb reissue from Fender that they produce now, and an actual 68 Drip Edge Princeton Reverb from 68. So what did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Obviously, I think each amp is surprisingly different. I think there's definitely an overall kind of character that they both have, but I was really surprised at just how different these two amps sound. So like I said, let us know in the comments which you liked more. Are you a Princeton fan? Let us know. And be sure to follow us on the internet and social media at Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, be sure to stop by sometime here in Atlanta, Georgia. Till next time, I'm Chris. Cheers.